Hey, what's good, y'all? Got another vlog video for you, and I'm just gonna jump into this one. Starting with movies. Yep. I wanna talk movies with y'all, bruh. Let's get into this right here. Let's get into this. Because there is one movie recently that I've seen, and I definitely want to get into. And that is Endgame. Avengers Endgame. Well, I loved it. Like I said, I'm just gonna jump into this thing. Avengers Endgame, loved it, loved the movie. It's only been a month since the movie dropped in theaters. Yeah, it was the last stretch of April that it released, but screw it. It was a month ago. It was a month ago, soon to be 2 months, because we're reaching the end of May right now. But yeah, man, I loved Endgame. I loved it. From beginning to end, I loved it. It was worth the wait coming off of Infinity War, especially for how it ended. I wondered how the hell they gonna find a way to get out of this one, because usually these are the kinds of characters that we tend to follow, and the villain is just the driving force of the character's plot, the main character's plot, the hero's story, right? And for Thanos to do what he did in Infinity War, by the end of the film, I'm like, well, damn. The fact that they actually ended it like this. Usually the bad guys don't win. And for that to happen, I'm like, yes, finally, we actually get a movie that raises the stakes here. The bad guy actually wins. Because for real, when I went into this movie, the only high expectation I had was for Thanos to be a formidable villain. And the fact that he actually won, it was like, wow. Damn. I mean, the dude showed up, but damn. They actually did that. He actually did that. He did what he did. He snapped his fingers. Half of all life wiped out. Not just on Earth, but the entire universe. Okay? That was crazy right there. Like, for real, throughout the film, had Thanos not worked as a character, the movie would have suffered. Even for all the good stuff I can enjoy with the film, if Thanos didn't work as a character, as a villain in that film, I could care less about him. And then the movie suffers for that. He was a formidable villain, for starters, and he had a motivation as to why he does what he does, even though his actions makes him the bad guy. He believed himself to be the hero, and that was the whole point of his story arc. It made sense. We all know he's the bad guy at the end of the day, but what he was talking about as to why he does what he does is twisted as hell, but it's like, well, it seemed like he did have a counterpoint. Or he had counterpoints. So going into Endgame, what they did in the beginning of the film, I did not expect for them to do that. I did not expect... Like I said, it's only been a month, soon to be 2. I don't want to get into spoiler territory for those who haven't seen it, but at this point, everybody might as well have seen the daggone movie, okay? Going into Endgame, though, what they did at the beginning of the film, I did not think they was going to do that. I really didn't think they was going to do it like that. I'm not going to say what it is. You just got to see for yourself, especially for those, if you feel like you're not really interested in this stuff as a casual goer, as a casual moviegoer, if you're not a fan of this stuff, especially for y'all, if y'all take interest in this film, yeah, man. I would recommend this to y'all. I would. But yeah, I loved it. I loved this movie. There were plenty of moments that I didn't expect. Plenty of moments that I expected to get, but I didn't think they were actually going to follow through with it. There were plenty of moments for me to get excited, for me to get happy and cheer like crazy. There were plenty of moments for that to happen, especially at the latter portion of the film. Especially that. And there were definitely moments that got me in the feels. There were moments that got me in the feels. I can admit that. It did. It did, because after all this build-up within these movies, to the point of where they at right now, it's like, well, okay, makes sense why they did what they did with this. I get it. And some of the character arcs that took place in the film, I'm like, oh, I get it. I get why they're going through this. And I get why the movie is as long as it is, because that would be the first thing that usually turns people off, the runtime. The fact that this film was actually 3 hours. Well, 3 hours, 2 minutes to be exact. But a 3-hour movie nonetheless, because we usually don't get that long a movie in a blockbuster. The only other time you could ever talk about that was the Lord of the Rings films. This just so happens to be another one of those films that falls in line with that. A 3-hour film. But I get it. It makes sense as to why it is, because after the events of Infinity War, we had to feel the weight of the situation play into Endgame. What goes on in the characters' heads due to the fallout of everything that happened. The decimation, as it's called. And it's like, makes sense. I get it. Because, of course, the characters are gonna really take this L on that. The fact that half the universe got wiped out, half of life in the universe got wiped out, they had to take a major L on that one. And so we had to feel the weight of that situation, and I felt it. They were going through it. And so for their story arcs, it's like, wow, they are definitely going through it. And by the time the movie ended, it was like, jeez, now I feel like I gotta watch this movie again to get a grasp on what happened. I already got the idea. Now I need to get a grasp on it. I gotta watch it again to get a grasp on it now. I loved it though. I loved the movie. I did. Because it was more of a character-driven movie. And it was worth it to me, because I'm always up for that. Character-driven movies get me. Storylines that drives the character motivation to be the main focus. Before the action hits, I can live with that, because when the action hits and the story makes sense, the characters make sense within that, it's like, okay. When the action hits, it hits because of those moments. Because without those moments, even if the action is good, I don't care about that. That's just me. Even when it comes to the action, if it's good, I don't care about that if the characters and the story does not work. If that didn't work, I didn't care about the action, even if it's good. Because it had all those elements to go along with it, I'm good with that. And I loved the movie for it. I appreciated the fact that it was a character-driven movie and not just heavy on the action. With action, there's a reaction. With Infinity War, there comes Endgame. That's the point. And I see why the movie is as long as it is. It needed those moments for that payoff to happen. Some people are gonna feel like that this movie was boring, it was slow, it wasn't as entertaining as I thought it was gonna be. Yeah, that's a given, that's gonna happen. But you can't please everybody, right? For me though, I wasn't trying to set the bar that high on myself. I knew what I was getting into when watching Endgame. I knew what I was getting myself into. I just had to prepare myself for the end result as to how everything plays out. And it was worth it. Now, I want to talk about movies that I'm interested in seeing. John Wick 3. I mean, duh. Why wouldn't I see the damn movie? I already saw both. I already saw 2 of the John Wick movies. Loved the first one. And the second one, I felt like it topped the first one. Because it got a chance to give me a deeper look into the world of John Wick. The Continental at that. It gave me a deeper look into that lore, into that story, into that underground world, underground assassination world, where they could be everywhere, but they stay hidden. And the action, the stakes were raised, the bar was raised on the action in the second movie. Yeah, there was a point in the film that it took a little bit of time for it to kick in, but once it does, it does. Now, I've been hearing good things about John Wick 3. Now, the first 2 movies I didn't get to see in the theaters. I didn't get to experience the first 2 movies in the theaters. This time, I definitely want to watch John Wick 3 in the theater. It'll be worth it for me to watch the third one in the theater. A lot of people are saying good things about this one. And I hope to get that same experience once I see it. And I want to see it in theaters. I damn for sure want to see it in theaters. Alright? Another movie that I wanted to see was Brightburn, because I'm curious as to how that movie is going to play out. I'm curious about this. Because it's basically Superman, but the Bizarro effect. Especially for those of y'all who know your comic book lore when it comes to Superman, Bizarro, he's supposed to be the opposite of him, right? I feel like that's what this movie is doing. Superman, but it's the opposite. It's basically that. But as far as how the movie plays out, I'm curious to see how it does. As far as the main guy himself, the main kid, the supporting characters that follows, and the story that takes place as to why this movie is presented in this way. I got the gist of it, but now I want to grasp it once I see it. I don't know if I'm going to watch it in theaters though. I don't know about that. If I do, then I do. If I don't, I don't mind that. Because once I get a chance to see it, nonetheless, I'm going to see it. I'm curious. I want to see what this movie looks like. How the story's going to play out and what happens to the main kid. I'm intrigued by the idea of what this story could do. Because if you love Superman and you're curious about watching this movie, you got to prepare yourself for that one. And I'm preparing myself for that one. I'm curious to watch that movie. No lie. I'm curious to see that. And Spider-Man Far From Home looks promising to be the follow-up to Spider-Man Homecoming. Especially given the fact that it takes place right after Avengers Endgame. And if you've seen the movie, you know how it ended up when it came to Spider-Man. I'm not going to say exactly what it is, but if you've seen the movie, you know what happens with Spider-Man in the end. Which leads into Far From Home. And of course, I'm seeing that movie anyway. Of Of course I am. I love Spider-Man as a character, and I really do enjoy this interpretation of Spider-Man. I'm really enjoying this right now. I am. And I feel like Far From Home is definitely going to be a step up from Homecoming. I believe so. Because I enjoyed Homecoming. But I really want to enjoy Far From Home. It looked like it's trying to one-up the film. Hopefully it does. If not, be as good as the first one. That's all I can hope for with that one. It looks interesting. And on top of that, a classic Spider-Man villain is going to show up. I mean, we have Vulture already. Now Mysterio is going to be in it? Mysterio. Played by one of my favorite actors, Jake Gyllenhaal. That's unbelievable. Because at one point he was supposed to play Spider-Man. Now he's playing one of Spider-Man's villains. Ain't that something? He was supposed to play Spider-Man during the time Tobey Maguire played Spider-Man. Now he's in a Spider-Man film playing one of his villains. I thought that was interesting. And you could check out Jake's Instagram, and he played off of that he was supposed to play Spider-Man at one point in his career. But that didn't happen. But now he's going to be in a Spider-Man film, and he's playing off of that. And I love that. That was hilarious. But yes, because this is supposed to take place right after Endgame, if you see Avengers Endgame, and then you go into Spider-Man Far From Home, you get an idea of what happens with Spider-Man. Simple as that. It's supposed to take place right after the film. So if you saw Endgame, you know what happens with Spider-Man in the film. And that's the purpose for Spider-Man Far From Home going into that one. So you get an idea of what you're getting yourself into once you go in to see it. Now, as far as movies goes, those are the ones that I could get into. Now, let's get into the shows. Now, the first thing that I want to get into is Game of Thrones, now that it just ended, for the entire show as a whole. Now, coming off of the 8th season of the show, it was a mixed bag for me. That's how I feel about it. It was a mixed bag. It was a mixed bag for me because there were certain things where it was like, well, really? This is how it's going to end up? Is it going to stick the landing? I mean, I had those kinds of questions in mind going into the 8th season knowing it was only going to be 6 episodes. And the fact that they tried to throw everything into 6 episodes is like, jeez, how the hell are you going to do that? It's 6 episodes. So I watched the 8th season, and it was a mixed bag for me. Especially when it came to the finale, it was a shaky ending. It did not stick it. It was a shaky one. I was actually hoping that there's a chance that it could do it, but it didn't. That sucks because I felt like with this season, let alone the previous season, they could have had more episodes to work with to flesh out everything that took place. With this being the final stretch of the show. And at some point, I was leaning on the idea on how they could have had like 2 more, 3 more seasons of this show to really flesh out the decisions that was made with the characters. And that means all the characters throughout the show. Yeah, the show, while it was getting ready to come to an end, it felt rushed. it felt like it was just trying to end right away instead of actually building up to the end. Instead, they were just trying to get to it. There are still some things that I enjoyed about it, though. There's still some things that I enjoyed about the seasons, the later seasons. There were plenty of things that I enjoyed. It's just that when it came to this one, season 8, people are going crazy over this right now. I mean, to the point where petitions are happening. Now, for me, I became a fan of the show once I've heard great things about it. And I didn't think I was going to get into the show like that. But it was about to be the 6th season of the show. And before it was set to drop, I watched the first 5 seasons. And I became a fan of the show. I ended up loving the show. So I was prepared to go into the 6th season. Loved it. Going into the 7th season, I still enjoyed it for what it was, but I felt like that it could have had more episodes to work with. But I was more forgiving about it. Now going into the 8th season, mixed bag. Like I said, due to the decisions of the characters, especially the specific ones that we've been following all this time, where it was like, well, we had all this build-up with these characters, and now it's like, wow, really? You just gonna jump ahead to this? That's how you're gonna do it? This is how you're gonna end this? So yeah, I had my gripes, I had my complaints, but there was still some things to enjoy about the show as a whole, let alone the 8th season, at least for me. There's still things to enjoy. It's just that when it came to the 8th season of the show, a lot of people had their expectations high for something, especially when it came to the fan theories, especially when it comes to that, and given the fact that they've invested their time into this show and they felt like they wasted it, especially if they have the HBO Now service that they use to catch up on the show. They felt like they wasted their time, their money, on a show that was meant to be one of, if not the best show in television history, only for it to end up how it ended up. Why is that? Now, from that standpoint, I could understand why people are pissed off, because there are things that they thought it was going to happen and it didn't happen. So it's the whole subverting the expectations scenario, where it's like, for a lot of them, it was subversion in the worst way possible, because they didn't want that. They wanted what they wanted, and because they didn't get it, there's the outrage that came with it, because they felt like they wasted their time and money investing all their energy into this show that they were following for so long. I mean, given the amount of time that's passed since the show started, I get that. But I'm not the type of dude to take it to such extremes as a petition to have the show rewritten, remade. There's no point in that, because, really? There's no point in that. It's not like you were physically there during the process of it all. It's not like it's your project that you put together. What we had to take in is what we've been given. We had to take for what was given to us, whether we liked it or not. Because at the end of the day, we didn't write it, we didn't produce it, let alone directed this stuff. We didn't do any of that. The only thing we could do is say whether we liked it or not, say what we feel about it, move on with our lives. when the conversations pop up again, because of course they do, when the conversations pop up again, you make up your mind about it, you move on with your life. I'm not the type of dude to take it to such extremes as to go on the internet just to spill my outrage on something that I didn't like, something that I didn't get due to a show like this, because it built up that much of a fan base. Like, I became a fan of this show, let alone became a huge fan of this show. But I knew better than to put myself in that position where it becomes that kind of fandom that I don't like. I'm not a huge fan of that. I don't like that side of the fandom where it becomes a toxic environment just because you expected something, but you didn't get what you wanted, only for you to spill that outrage onto the internet, which is why there have been times that even when it comes down to the actors and actresses themselves, they tend to revolt against that. Sometimes they try to do it in a polite way, but you can tell when they are ready to tell people off. Like, really? The fact that you're willing to take it this far, I mean, what we ended up getting is what we ended up getting, whether we liked it or not. This whole thing with the petitions, what's the point in that? What's that gonna do? There's no point. I mean, that's how I look at it. There's no point to it. For me, there's a lot to love with this show. A lot. Plenty of things to love about the show. At its highest, that's how I feel. At its highest, there's plenty of things to love about this show. At its lowest, it all comes down to the writing. And yeah, this latest season that just ended the whole entire show, it was a mixed bag for me. Some of the writing was all over the place. Some of the writing felt out of place. Some of it was weird. Like, really? I did not expect for them to pull something like this. The hell is that about? But I saw it through, and at the end of the day, for what it's worth, like I said, there's still a lot to love about this show. Even the latest seasons of the show, there's still a lot to love about it. Now, people are comparing this to Dexter, and I feel like how this show ended, it's not as bad as how Dexter ended. Let me not get into Dexter, okay? I feel like how Game of Thrones ended, it's not as bad as Dexter's. That's just how I feel about it. It's not as bad as that. But I could understand the disappointment because I felt that way too. Because I could have at least have gotten more episodes to flesh this all out, instead of it just coming to an end like that. I could understand the whole thing of not having the show overstay its welcome. It ran for 8 seasons now, so it's like we gotta end it at some point. Okay, I get that side of it, but when it comes to the story, the characters, everything that's been built up to the point of where we at now, it felt like as if you was just trying to get there for the sake of getting there, instead of taking your time with it. Let it build. So then we get the payoffs. Or the proper payoffs. But yeah, that's just how I feel on that. Game of Thrones, I'm still for the show. Because I enjoyed it nonetheless. I loved it. I still love the show. Regardless. It's a lot to love about the show. At its highest, that's how it is. At its lowest, It came down to the writing. That's how it is. Rick and Morty, I can't wait to get into Rick and Morty again. They dropped a teaser on Adult Swim, letting us know it's going to drop in November. They didn't give an official date, but it's supposed to drop in November, and I can't wait for Rick and Morty. I already finished watching 3 seasons of that show, and look how big it's gotten already. It's only 3 seasons of the show. Look how big it's gotten. That's crazy. And that's how much of a fan of the show I am, because it's not just the kind of show where it's on the surface humor, as people would expect to think when it comes to a show like this. Or, I wouldn't say everybody, but I'm sure there's some people who would feel like as if this is just a silly show. It's a bunch of nonsense. But really, there's actually more to the show than you think, because it dives deep into the character of Rick, even though it doesn't seem that way, let alone his own daughter, Morty, his grandson, even Summer, his granddaughter, right? And even Jerry, even though he could look like a bumbling idiot, there's actually something more to his character, and let alone the adventures that take place within the show. It's actually a lot more than just what you see on the surface. It's actually more than that. Makes sense to me. And I became a huge fan of the show for that reason. And on top of that, the pop culture references, especially the ones that I could definitely pick up on. I may not be able to pick up on every single one of them, but the ones that I do pick up on is because, oh, right, I saw this. I heard this. Like, I tend to pick up on it every time I do. I'm like, oh, wow, the fact that they even did that. That's funny. That's hilarious. And the kind of humor that takes place on the show is not just the surface level humor. It's actually the kind of humor that if you get the joke, you'll get a laugh out of it. That's the kind of show that it is. Yeah, it's a cartoon, but it ain't your typical kid's cartoon. Think about that. It's not your typical kid's cartoon. That's not the kind of show Rick and Morty is. And I enjoy it for that reason. So I'm looking forward to season 4. I'm glad that they're getting another season off the ground. They're working on it. Hopefully we get more episodes than the 3rd season, because the 3rd season was supposed to have a bit more episodes to work with, like 14 to be exact. They were supposed to have 14, but instead they ended on 11, I think. 11 episodes? Yeah, some people felt like that the season finale was not necessarily a season finale. It's another episode that you could have extended it for a little bit longer. But of course, it has to do with the behind-the-scenes stuff. So that came into play with the whole thing as to why it ended up the way it ended up. But I'm looking forward to season 4, though. So hopefully we get some more episodes to work with this season. But I'm excited to see season 4 of Rick and Morty, because I really do enjoy that show so much. I really do enjoy it. There's plenty of shows that I want to get into, and it's a lot. It's a lot, bruh. One Punch Man, I'm getting back into watching that anime for season 2. I'm excited that the show came back. Oh my goodness. Because after watching the first season, it felt like forever. 2015, the joint came out for the first season of the show. It was that long ago. Like, jeez. It was that long ago. I was waiting on that joint forever. Glad it came back. I'm glad it came back. I don't know if I said this in another video before, but yeah, One Punch Man is basically the Deadpool of anime. That's what drives the show for me, and I love that. But then the action that takes place in there, hey, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. I love it. I love it. It plays on the tropes of overpowered characters and what it would look like in the life of a character who is overpowered, let alone characters who are overpowered. It's not as exciting as it usually portrays itself. That's the whole point. I love that. I love it. It's a different change of pace. A different way of storytelling in an anime. And it works. I enjoyed the hell out of that. I can't wait for Black Mirror to come back. I done already saw all 4 seasons of the show on Netflix. I can't wait for season 5, and it's gonna drop at the beginning of next month. I'm curious to see how this is gonna shake up. This is gonna be interesting. I did see the couple trailers that dropped on YouTube. I saw them, and it's just teasers. It's not giving away nothing. That's a good thing. And I'm glad to get that. It gets me excited for what's to come in Black Mirror. And I love that show. I love this show because it really gives us a deep dive into what humanity looks like alongside technology and the ramifications that it has, the consequences that it has, and at some points, the good that it can do. It's very intriguing for a show like that. And so far, I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it. The Bandersnatch one, that was interesting. A Black Mirror movie. That was an interesting one. But if I'm just talking about the show, yeah, I can't wait for the next season. I can't wait for the next season. And this next month, I'm prepared for it, man. I am prepared. I am prepared for that joint. I can't wait for that. Now, I want to get into the music. First off, I want to get into the singles that dropped. And I mean the recent ones. Because there's a Joyner Lucas and Logic joint. There's a Young Thug, Travis Scott, J. Cole joint. Right? There's the Logic and Eminem joint. And I wanted to get into those real quick. First off, let me get into the Logic and Eminem thing. They both murdered that track. I mean, come on, it's Eminem, of course. We expect that from him. I mean, yeah, a lot of the time these days we feel like there's something off with Eminem, that he's slacking in some areas in terms of him being a rapper, where it's getting to the point where it sounds like we expect to get what we get from him, but now it's like it's a mixed bag, or it's a bad thing for that to happen, because when it comes to M, we expect him to surprise us. Now it's like, okay, he's not necessarily going to do that this time around. He already did it way back when. It's not like he's going to recapture that again. And I've come to accept that reality of it all. I still enjoy Eminem, though, regardless of that. I still enjoy it. I still enjoy Eminem. I can listen to him anytime. I'm not saying I love everything he did, but I could listen to him anytime. Now, the Logic and Eminem joint, the only thing about that joint that I'm going to be a bit critical about is Logic himself. And because it's supposed to be his own joint. First off, I felt like listening to the whole joint by itself, the song itself. I felt like Logic could definitely use some more content in that joint. I felt like he could have had more content to go with that track, especially for how he was spitting the way he was spitting. The thing is, Yeah, we know you had that technicality, but if you don't have that substance with it, you're just throwing in filler bars. And I felt like there have been times he was throwing in filler bars, but he did have some bars that hit though. He did have some bars that was hitting though. I can't lie about that. He had some bars that was hitting me. I quite enjoyed that. Now the hook, I could understand what he was trying to do with the hook of the song, because it was supposed to make a reference to the fact that he got Eminem on a song with him, and a reference to one of Eminem's old classic joints. My name is, the chicka chicka Slim Shady thing that he did in there. I just felt like it was overplayed though. It was overplayed, like, okay, Logic, we get it. You don't have to keep throwing this into the hook like that. We get it. You have Eminem on the track with you. We get it, bruh. Felt like that was one of the weaker points in the song for me. But other than that, I enjoyed it. And Eminem killed it, as he always does. I sound like a stan right now, right? But, like I said, it's not like I'm gonna enjoy everything he does. There have been times, yeah, that has happened. But I still could listen to Eminem anytime. I don't have a problem with that. Now getting into the Joyner Lucas and Logic joint. Logic came through on that one. He came through on that joint. Joyner Lucas was going to kill it anyway. He was going to kill it. I already knew that coming from him, man. And he's actually one of my favorite rappers to listen to right now. The current ones, one of the current rappers, I enjoy listening to Joyner Lucas. He be killing it. Sure, he may have his moments where it was not in his favor. Granted. But as a rapper, I respect him as a rapper for real. He's crazy with it. Logic came through on that joint though. He came through with it, bruh. He came through with it. They both did. They both came through on that track, bruh. They both came through with that, man. Like for real, there was some heat going on that track, bruh. They was spitting for real, man. Logic came through. Joyner killed it, but Logic came through with it, man. And I felt like even when he was trying to get into his rapid flow on that track, like I said, Joyner, he kills it. The thing about him though, when he gets into that pocket, he actually has substance to go along with it. It's not just rapping for the sake of rapping. He actually got something to go along with it. Logic came through with that as well. And it's like, okay, there you go, Logic. Do more of that. Anytime you get into your pocket of being able to spit the way that you do, throw some substance in there. He actually did. Now, am I going to go on and overhype this track? No, I'm not going to do that. But for me, as a person to listen to the track and give my final thoughts about it, yeah, they both came through with it though. I can't lie about that. They came through with it though. I ain't going to overhype the track, but they came through with it though. Joyner Lucas, of course. Logic, we need more of this. We need more of this, bro. And the Young Thug joint, put it this way. I could listen to that song, and I've mentioned this to you guys before. Real quick before I end this one, because I'm going to put up another one. The thing is, I feel like that with that joint, I could bump that. The problem is, it's the main guy himself. Just when I thought he had something good going for his verse when he was trying to come through with it, it's like, ah, crap, he had to do it. He ruined it. But I'm going to get into it in the next video, though, to